My name is Erik Heinze Milne. I'm running in the Portland-Simonds riding for the NDP this election. I'm a relatively recent immigrant to the city. I just moved here a little under 2 years ago from Nova Scotia for work. And, I've been finding that there's a lot of people here in St. John who are kind of falling through the cracks. And I wish that I could trust our provincial governments that we've had, and based on what I've heard from other people in the area I've had in the past, to really do something about that. But it just isn't happening. There's nonprofits that are doing a lot of good work, like the Human Development Council and Living SJ, and that's great. But they really need to be supported from the branches of government as well, because the government's going to have a lot more resources to do something. That's basically why I'm running. It's just, I saw people that were in need, and they aren't getting the help they need. They aren't getting the support they need. They're having trouble keeping roofs over their heads, or food on the table, or accessing the health care they need. And basically, I wanted to do something.
So what's a campaign day like for you in a COVID type environment?
That's been pretty tricky, especially as a first-time candidate trying to get my name out there. You can't really responsibly go door to door. It's a situation where even though we've done really well in New Brunswick with the pandemic and getting things under control and keeping our cases low, but it's still it's not gone. It's still something that we're going to need to deal with until we can have a vaccine. So going door to door and interacting with a lot of people, and basically you're becoming a single point where you're connecting a lot of people that might not otherwise be connected from a contact tracing standpoint. So I've been trying to avoid doing that as much as possible, and primarily interacting with people either through my Facebook page or directly through email, phone calls, basically any other method I can think of to try and talk to people, listen to their concerns, and get my name out there.
I'd like to talk a bit about voter turnout. Generally, it's declined over the years from over 82% in 1967 to a little over 66% 2 years ago. But voter turnout is low in St. John, and it's low in Portland-Simonds. It's the second lowest voter turnout rate, just eking out a few decibels of a percentage point behind or over St. John Harbor. So do you have an explanation for this, Erik? Do you know why the voter turnout rate would be so low, or do you know ways that we could improve that voter turnout?
Honestly, this is something that I've been hearing from people I've been talking to in Portland-Simonds as well. Concerns about low voter turnout, or just feeling like them going to vote isn't doing anything. And that's a result of every election that we're having. We either have a conservative government or a liberal government. It just kind of flip-flops back and forth. We end up with a shade of purple, basically, is what I say. And they're feeling like their voices aren't being heard in government, even when they do vote. And that's honestly really disheartening. The whole point of this process is to let people's voices be heard. And I'm hoping that the NDP platform, with our increases in the minimum wage, supports for low-income families and individuals, supports for healthcare, funding of education to help people get into jobs, encouraging a green economy, which in itself generates lifetime careers. We're hoping that'll resonate with people. That's what we want to do. We're in this to help people. We're not in this for a power grab like some other parties might be, right?
We canvassed community organizations throughout your constituency, and we got back a number of questions that we divided into themes. So I've got about 4 of them for you. The first one is related to poverty, which has been persistently high in the constituency. Minimum wages are low, and they're only tied to inflation. Social assistance rates are low in New Brunswick by any standard. Millions of dollars have been spent by the province in St. John since the election in 2015. What do we have to do to get the rate down?
Yeah, so this is kind of the primary reason I'm running, is to help address poverty. Like, I was seeing poverty rates are really high, people are struggling. That is what made me want to run in the first place. You know, just in St. John here, we've got like 1 in 5, and these are numbers from before the pandemic started, just to be clear. So it'd be worse now, but you know, we have 1 in 5 people in poverty. You know, when it comes to children, that's 1 in 3. That's crazy. Like, we can't be having, you know, a full third of our children, you know, going hungry because, you know, their parents aren't able to put food on the table because either the wages just aren't high enough to support living in the area, or, you know, even worse, if they're not able to find work due to socioeconomic barriers like, you know, not enough investment in public transport. Investing in public transportation is incredibly important, just because that's what often allows people to be able to get to a job. And you can kind of get into a situation when you're in poverty, and I've experienced this myself in the past, where if you don't have things like public transport, or you're just really struggling to make ends meet, it can actually get into a situation where it becomes too expensive to actually find a job. Like, if you're not able to get to where the jobs are consistently or on time, which is an issue that can happen if you have underfunded public transport, you're not going to be able to get a job. You're not going to be able to find a job. You know, trying to get a car is something that can often be out of reach, even just paying for car insurance, let alone the car itself. So that's something that's really important. We need supports for, you know, increasing job skills. We have some of that now. We need more access to funding for increased education, job training, supports for things like getting people, even interview clothes can be a big one. You know, trying to get a suit and tie to apply for a job, that's really expensive, especially when you're struggling to make ends meet. And on the social assistance point that you raised there, I actually looked it up just before I came, and the social assistance maximum for a single mother with child is $861 a month. Just to reiterate, that $861 a month. That is incredibly low. Generally speaking, when you're talking about being able to afford a place to live, you really shouldn't be spending more than 25 to 30% of your income on your housing. So if we take that number, we're looking at somewhere in the, you know, $200 to $300 a month for housing. You can't find that in St. John. It's just not realistic. And then in addition to that, the way that the assistance is set up, even if they do manage to find a part-time job or, you know, even a full-time job, any money they make at that job comes straight out of their assistance first. So if they find a job where it gives them $500, like they make $500 a month extra, they're not making anything extra. That comes straight out of their assistance. There's no change to their ability to afford housing or put food on the table at that point. So with that, like, there's a change that was made in Nova Scotia a few years ago with their social assistance program, where essentially when you found a job or found work, you didn't lose all of that money that you made have earned. You got to keep 100% of it up to, I think, $500 a month. And then after that, you kept 30%. So there was really an incentive there, even when you were on assistance, to like go find work, try to find work, because it would actually improve your situation. You never ran into a situation where finding work could leave you in a worse off position than if you hadn't found work. So I think it's really important to change that in the way our social assistance works.
COVID was a game changer. totally unanticipated, but with enormous impacts. And a large impact was the fact that it magnified issues that vulnerable populations face: food insecurity, isolation, mental health issues. Precariously employed constituents talked about a concern over unpaid sick leave days. The opening of schools worries many parents. What is your plan or your party's plan to ensure that the issues highlighted by COVID are addressed?
Well, I've talked a little bit about, finding work already. As far as the sick leave, that's something where the party wants to implement, and I want to implement a system where there is a guaranteed number of sick days for all New Brunswickers working in the province. That's really important because, like, even from a business standpoint, having sick employees come in is not good for your business. That's something where if they come in when they're sick because they can't afford not to, then there's a risk that they're going to get other employees sick or your customers sick, and that just kind of keeps a chain or ball rolling, and it doesn't really stop. So, I think that we should be giving people paid sick leave just because I believe in putting people first, but there's a business argument to be made for it as well.
Next question has to deal with health. New Brunswick has the second highest rate of disability in the country, and constituents raised concerns about mental health and addictions, about wait times, about access to family physicians. What would you do to improve our health system generally and in the constituency in particular?
So the NDP supports greater investment into healthcare, particularly neighborhood clinics. The big one that we've been talking about a lot recently is Clinic 554 in Fredericton. Obviously not in my riding, but it's the kind of system that we'd like to support going forward, having those kind of community clinics that are able to focus specifically on the health issues that are relevant to their area, to the neighborhood, rather than having a kind of catch-all approach that is kind of generalized. It's not targeted to what the people in the area really need. We want that like kind of local clinic where they can focus on what's important in the area that they're in.
In June, just 2 months ago, there were 89 people in St. John actively experiencing homelessness. Men, women, LGBTQ, young, old. Concerns were raised about some of our systems that arguably discharge people into homelessness, in particular the health system and jails, provincial jails. What does the province need to do to end homelessness?
That's a big question. Homelessness generally isn't a result of any one factor. You can be out of a job, or sometimes you can even have a job and just be unable to afford putting a roof over your head. That can happen a lot. And that's part of the reason why we want to increase the minimum wage, is because, as I mentioned earlier, like the social assistance rates, you can't really afford to find somewhere to live on them reasonably. And, if you're working full time in a minimum wage job, you're not that much better off, honestly. So we need to raise those rates to give people the ability to afford where we're living in the area. We also need to invest more in low-income housing to put more housing stock in the market that people can afford in order to live there. There's a new apartment building that went up in the riding recently that's charging, I believe they're planning to charge $1,200 a month for their units. That boggles my mind given the socioeconomic status of a lot of people in the area. It seemed incredibly tone deaf to me. We need more housing that's affordable. I make decent money, and even I couldn't really afford to live there. So yeah, that's not okay. As far as like people getting discharged of healthcare or jails into homelessness, we need to have some sort of like, especially coming out of the jails, some sort of like halfway house type setup. I believe in Denmark they have a really good system where, you know, there's kind of a community that they've set up to help people phase back into normal life. You know, for coming out of the jail system or coming out of the prison system, so that they're not just kind of thrown back out into the world without any supports to help them, you know, adjust back into a civilian life.
I'd like to probe a bit more into the housing piece, because a particular issue in Portland is the state of housing conditions. The North End has the worst housing conditions in the city.
Yeah.
Many vacant lots, boarded up buildings causing fire hazards. Residents spoke about the need for mixed income housing development. Overall rents are increasing in the city. A living wage report released earlier this week talked about a 12.5% increase in 3-bedroom apartment rents just in the last 2 years. So what would you do to support the development of affordable housing?
I would support investment in that area, trying to build public housing options in the area. I do think it's important to try to create mixed income neighborhoods, because part of the issue with getting these things done is people that aren't in the situation tend to not want to know about it, right? And I don't think it's necessarily anything malicious. We just, as a society, have a tendency to look away from uncomfortable truths. And we need to stop doing that, because these are things that are deeply pressing issues. They're having a human cost on our communities, on our city, on our province, and they need to be addressed. And having mixed income neighborhoods helps prevent people from kind of getting disassociated from what's happening to, you know, their fellow citizens, right? You know, if we kind of have all the low income housing kind of shoved off into one neighborhood where nobody has to look at it, then people are going to avoid looking at it. This just generally what ends up happening, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Any other issues you'd like to address, or final comments you'd like to make?
I mean, again, you know, this is my first time running for office, and anything outside of a student council. I realize that I don't have all the answers, but especially right now, I don't think anyone really does. And if someone is saying they do, they're probably not being entirely honest with you. I believe very much in the things that I'm talking about here, like the issues of poverty and homelessness and lack of access to healthcare. These are the reasons that I decided to run during the snap election. And the reason they're so important to me is because I have actually experienced these issues for myself. You know, I have been homeless before. I've had issues accessing adequate health care. I've had issues trying to keep a roof over my head or put food on the table. Like, for me, these are not theoretical issues that I'm talking about as a politician. These are things that I know how damaging they can be to individuals or families that are living with these issues every day, and where I've seen that nobody was doing anything about it, I had to step up and try to do something. So I really hope that other people in the riding feel the same way I do.
Erik, Heinze, thanks very much.
Thank you.